Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. How you doing, Nora?
Quite well today, Brian. I'm very excited that we have a guest today who will remain nameless for a few more moments. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. I always find it interesting when we say that we have a guest. Anybody who's watching on YouTube can see this person hovering over our little heads. And so it's like, who's that? I wonder. So we'll get into the official introduction in a few minutes. No, everything's going really good. How's it out there in California?
It's good. It's good. You know, the weather's nice finally again. I know some of you have been following the podcast closely, know that it's been very gray, but there's sunlight today. I'm very happy.
I'm going to be there in like 2 weeks. So I'm expecting you to please put the order in now for a little bit more warmth. I'd really appreciate it. I got to get out of this right now. I'm looking and it's 29 degrees here. It's not very much fun. So I'm looking forward to hopefully being a little bit warmer. But without any further ado, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. You can always reach out to us at movingcombos@gmail.com. That's our email. That's where we probably engage the most. We also do it through Instagram, Moving Convos, as well as if you look in the show notes, you'll see Nora's and my socials, so you can follow all of that. And without further ado, I'm going to allow Nora to take it away on the introduction of our special guest. Super excited, by the way.
So our special guest is Matt McCulloch, who is from Kinected Studio in New York City. And we're really excited to have Matt on. Matt and Brian connected in China, which was really fortuitous because I've always wanted to talk to Matt about all the many things that he does. And now we have an opportunity. His studio is one of the few that have been doing Pilates and rehabilitation, so Pilates and physical therapy got integrated for a really long time and at a very high level. And Matt's done a lot of work with triathletes and with youth athletes and with men's Pilates and some really, really great topics. So today we're here to welcome Matt McCulloch. And the topic for today is talking about youth sports and training for youth sports. It's a specialized topic, but I'm sure any of you with kids know how this is going. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I like this idea of people not seeing me and you're talking about me being here. It creates a little bit of a mystique, I think. There's a reveal moment that's going to happen at some point. So I appreciate you creating that environment for me.
You know what? Maybe we should do that. Have someone hold up sort of a black thing in front of their camera so that they can do the reveal. Ta-da!
Until they go poof.
Yeah. It's like the Pilates version of the Masked Singer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it. The Masked.
Who's doing the hundreds here? Who is this?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got here, what your approach is. Tell us a little bit about Kinected.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I have a lot of respect for both of you. I think I think this is a great platform to have, and for instructors and clients and lay people and fitness people all to have access to it. It's one of the things that I like about your platform is how disarming it is. And I feel like it makes complicated information potentially accessible to a wide group of people. So thank you for doing that in our mission to get this information out to the world, right? I had somewhat of a traditional trajectory to Pilates, started at a relatively young age, but I was an athlete, and the sports that I participated in were baseball, basketball, cross country, and dance. And I say that because dance is a sport. And I have this little pet peeve when people separate dance from sport. Have you ever noticed how that happens?
Yes.
And it is not only an individual sport, it's a team sport. Because if
Yes.
you have ever seen contact improv, it does not get more team sport oriented and trust, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting about dance that I think is, it has this stigma for people that are not familiar with it, of it not being a sport. And it's like there was a research study that analyzed all the sports and how taxing it was on the body. Number one was hockey. Number two, rugby came in there. And then dance was right after it. And when you
Wow.
think about it, it's a
Yep.
full contact sport without any safety equipment.
Mhm.
Nothing.
True that.
Nothing. And by the way, your contact is with other people, the floor, the wall, all kinds of things. So anyway, I just wanted to hop on my soapbox there for a minute about dance. So
Well,
go
man,
ahead.
I have to appreciate that because I came from the dance medicine department at St. Francis, 30 years ago, and that was really the first time that dance medicine had a thing, because that was really the beginning of orthopedics, for example, even recognizing that dance was a specialized sport activity.
Right.
Right. I mean, so yeah, I totally get that. And they also, at that point, there was some study about who has the highest pain threshold.
Yeah.
And it was football players and then dancers.
Right. And then dancers that are Pilates instructors.
Right.
It probably falls in after that. And that's interesting that you bring that up. It does not get more specialized than dance. And how long has it been around? And anyway, we could go on and on about that.
Yeah.
Well, I've worked with a number of dancers, and what's interesting, I've hired them as Pilates instructors as well as worked with them. Almost every one of them, by the time they get into their early 40s, have some sort of serious injury, whether their knees, their hips, their ankles, something. So when you think of sports-related injuries, most people would never consider dance as a sports-related injury. It's sort of like, oh, your knee is bothering you a little bit. It's like, it could be the same as someone who played football for the last 15 years. I mean, no cartilage equals no cartilage. It's very similar, and it usually happens at a much younger age. I can't tell you how many dancers I know who have had hips replaced in their early 40s just because they literally have worn them out. So absolutely, I love the idea that it is a team contact sport. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I have a story related to my background in sports, all those sports, and my interaction with some of the parents that because I coach as well. So I will save that for later. So anyway, so at a relatively young age, I had my first knee injury. But prior to that, I started doing Pilates when I was in high school. I was fortunate enough in Charlotte, North Carolina, there was a woman that had trained with Ramana and moved back. She had her own dance company. She was adjunct faculty at UNC Charlotte. And so I started working with her, and that's where my journey starts. So, I was around 16, 17. So that was like 5 years ago, and really became immersed in it. And I knew it was one of those things where it was so fascinating that, and not to sound cheesy, but I felt like this would be a part of my life in some capacity, right? And then I had several knee injuries after that, torn ACL, tore both my menisci, rushed my recovery from full reconstruction. I was back performing 6 months after, and this was back in like the early 90s. I was doing double tours. I was, so that did not go as well as it should have. And so at that point, when I was performing, I had started completing several certifications. And then I was teaching. I'd been in New York. I was running a studio. There was a certification there. And I was teaching a course, small course. And there was one student that somewhat kept one-upping my anatomy Socratic method. And then finally, I was like, so what's your background? And this student just happened to say, well, I'm in medical school at Mount Sinai, and I'm also a teaching assistant for the gross anatomy department. I started my certification in Philly, in Chicago when I was at Northwestern because I was doing my post-bac and I wanted to finish it here. And I was like, so you landed in this cohort. Well, fortunately, that person ended up being my wife. And
I thought so.
things that ended up happening was we started talking about this conversation of how do movement and medicine, how do they interact in a more efficient and positive way? We're overlapping like crazy. And it was an interesting point in Carrie's life because Carrie was a student. So she was really seeing the front end of how medicine is supposed to be integrated in. And she had just finished a Pilates training and was teaching as a Pilates teacher. So she was on the front lines of both of those things.
Huh.
And at that point, we both were like, there's got to be a way to get all this clinic, give people more access to this information that you're getting at Mount Sinai. And so at that point, that was when I said, well, why don't we go for a date in the gross anatomy lab? And she was like, well, we can't do that. And that was when we went to Dr. Laitman, the chair of the department. And that's what led to the creation of FAMI. And we did that for about, I guess, around 18 years. And so that was where I really started to pivot into education. I was doing Pilates certifications, but seeing the benefit of fusion of the two worlds and how they could interact, just the terminology and the exposure to clinical medicine and that point of view. And so then from there, Carrie and I opened Kinected. We built a partnership with Kelly Kane and the Kane School, and I was drawn to working with Kelly because it is a somatic, more of a rehab corrective approach. And that really resonated with me. And her personality and openness and curiosity. And I felt like this is someone that I want to work with. And to her credit, has been an amazing process and fostering a really special partnership. And so then we opened Kinected, and that studio has been there for 20 years. We have a full-time physical therapy staff. It's Kinected Functional Manual Therapy. Elliot Fishbein runs it. He also has his own residency program for IPA physical therapy. He's an educator for them, and they're all functional manual therapists. So it's a nice little cross-pollination environment, always learning.
Wow.
He has his students, we have our students, and a really cool thing happened this past weekend, and that is the IPA has opened up some of their courses to Pilates instructors. And we did the first all Pilates IPA course, and it's a PNF course, which was amazing because it was interesting in seeing the correlates. So I still see clients. I don't want to ever stop seeing clients. I feel like the minute that happens, our chops start to change, and I'm not criticizing good or bad. And I love that ability and freedom to be creative. So that's where we are. How the youth sports interest evolved was very organic.
So can I ask you one question? So what is the IPA?
International Physio Arts.
Okay, just was like one of those things like, wait a minute, there's a thing that went by that I didn't know what it was. Okay.
Yeah. So
I know it's not a beer, so okay, we're carrying on.
Good point. It is intoxicating, but in an educational way. And they are functional manual therapists. And I will say it's very effective. It's very smart. Greg and Vicky Johnson are the creators of it, and it was just really interesting because this has been exclusive for PTs, and to have them open up a few of the courses, not all of them, to PTs was interesting at acknowledging where we are and where we fall in the healthcare continuum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So can I talk about how I got into youth sports?
Please.
Well, it happened 14 years ago. And I had sort of always been fascinated in just development overall, specifically in kids, and the various developmental stages. And so I had spent a lot of time in terms of studying that. I had seen a few kids, but then our first, we had Jules 14 years ago. And I was just really, as all parents are, fascinated with that process. But one thing that I was really committed to, and Carrie as well, is foundationally, I want them to have a different movement experience.
Yes.
And I wanted them to either be in dance or gymnastics. And I wanted them to play sports, right? I really wanted them to play sports, but I really was committed to them having that experience, for a lot of reasons.
That's funny because I had the exact same experience. It was like, to me, full body swimming or gymnastics.
Yeah.
And a mile and a half from our house is where Dominique Dawes did all of her training. So we got very fortunate that we got them in from like at 6 months old to start.
You think you got fortunate? I mean,
we got really fortunate that it was right there. But I love that thought because I had the exact same thought. Get them moving, get their bodies in motion so they understand their own bodies, so that they realize what they can and can't do. So they realize what movement really feels like, rather than having a coach at age whatever teach them something instead of really allowing their bodies to move properly. So I love that you sort of had that we both had a similar sort of brain, moment.
Well, and then there was the other piece of this, that there are so many stereotypes about males and dance and gymnastics. I was like, I don't want that to be a part of their life. And so starting it early, before they have any of those preconceptions that are pushed on them. Alvin Ailey has an all boys program. And it starts at a younger age when they're like 5, and that is all genders initially, and it's creative movement. There's a movement therapist, there's 2 company members. It's just like, it's so amazing. And then it's called their Athletic Boys, and he stayed in that until right after he made it through the first year of COVID. And I'm going to sort of piggyback this story with developmental conditioning. And one of the things, we had him in sports, we had him in soccer, we had him in baseball, and this was young. I did notice his balance was, and just understanding of like space was a little different. Reese, we started in gymnastics. And so my emphasis was the bigger spectrum of things, of like, men can be dancers, men can be gymnasts, everybody can do this. But in the developmental stages, there's the first stage of where they're basically just rolling around, right? Rolling is such an important part of the neurological and core development. And I like to quote Dr. Laitman, they're little when they're first born and they're infants. They're really little balls of cartilage, right? That's all they are. And until gravity starts really acting these forces on them, the bones really don't start to develop. And it's so interesting now, and where I am and having working with a lot of kids and comparing it to adults and seeing adults and asking them when they started to walk, when they crawled, because you have these stages of rolling. You have your tummy time, which we all know is really important, because those spinal curves are not there until they start the extension. Then you have your army person crawling. And then you have your quadruped. And I was doing with Jules. Oh my God, poor Jules. He was just like, I was so excited. We went to one of the first pediatrician I'll never forget, and I was like, so tummy time, can we talk about tummy time? How many sets are we doing and how many reps?
Yep.
The pediatrician was like, please don't bring him back again. Let's just keep it you and I, Carrie and Jules. But I'm kidding, of course. But I would put them on towels because I really wanted them to army man crawl and really get the 4 core response. And then there's the quadruped, and then there's the cruising where they're assisting themselves walking. And it's so interesting how complicated and straightforward all of those stages are. But what's interesting to me and is mind-blowing is when you see, and I'll sort of talk about youth sports in a silo in a minute and the business side of it, but when you really watch those developmental stages, like they still are cartilage and they're loosey-goosey, and you're taking an 8-year-old with a bat and you're throwing a ball at them and expecting them to make contact, but yet maybe they've missed a stage. This day and age, maybe there's a lot less activity because of screen time. And so there's a significant amount of less loading, and they don't have the organic organization system that's set up. So to ask them to do something more complicated is really, I understand why, but it's really interesting. So, they, I'll tell a story. This is really funny. I just thought about it. So we were in Tarrytown. So we live in Croton-on-Hudson in Westchester. We initially moved to Tarrytown from Brooklyn, the northern migration of Brooklyn. And we decided to move from Irvington to Croton. It's about a half an hour. Well, I was busy in the house, and Carrie was talking to someone in Croton. They're like, they need little league coaches. Do you want to coach? And I was like, sure. Well, we hadn't moved yet. So I'm driving every day for like 40 minutes. And two really special friends of mine that ended up being we all coached together up until our boys were 12. I showed up, I had a whistle, I had like a clipboard. I mean, they're 5-year-olds, and they love to tell this story because they were like, dude, we were like, who is this guy? And it was what is so important about youth sports on an even non-physical level is the interaction. And when you look at the trends of more screen time, more isolation, the ability to communicate, and I think we can all agree, we see it in certain generations of individuals that have a harder time communicating. And team sports, you have to communicate and you have to work together. And who can we curse on this show? Who gives a shit if they win or lose? And I think that, to me, is one of the most important parts of youth sports. Is who cares if they win? Let's care about the kid. Let's care about their health physically. Let's care about their emotional and mental health and their ability to communicate. And let's be inclusive, because it's a rare opportunity to have a consistent, isolated time practice of kids that may never interact together because of whatever those are. And they are put in a stressful environment. They're put in a positive environment. They're put in a sense of urgency, time sensitivity, focus, all of those things. And it's like, you look at like Google any YouTube, like Little League, especially like the younger ages. It is a hot mess. But there's such value in that hot mess. And I feel like, again, talking about the bigger things in life, there's a lot of failure in sports, and that's important. And I feel like we have such control in our society now on certain things, and we want that control because there are so many things that we don't have control over. And I feel like that's a good parenting moment too, that the parents on the sideline, they can't do anything about it. Their kid fails, they strike out, they trip, they fall, they get hurt, they're at risk, all of those things. And that, I mean, to get those life lessons so early, I mean, it's, personally with my own kids, I've seen them grow because of that. But I started coaching, when Jules was, I think, 5. He was like 3 or 4. And, now he's 14. So 10 years. And to see certain kids, because we live in a very small town, I've seen these kids mature. I've seen them on. There is crying in baseball, by the way. There is a shit ton of crying. I mean, there at one point, I'll never forget. At first it's like a ripple effect, but then eventually the entire dugout is crying. And it's like, I just remember like, wow, I was not expecting. But again, it's failure. They get to learn that, I'm okay. I'm fine. But you know what? I cared about losing, which is okay. I cared because maybe I did not perform up to speed. And so, that's like that's my mantra, my mission statement of why youth athletes and youth sports and that experience is so important. And I feel like where it's gone awry is, as is the case, money has gotten involved.
So Matt, I just want to underline everything you've said about the value of youth sports. Like that for me was just such a fantastic way of saying what the value is of working together, again, of teamwork, of having to learn how to work with other people, which doesn't always happen, as we know from managing some younger people in our careers, and that whole idea of this is really getting them prepared for the future. Because again, you're going to win, you're going to lose. Things are going to be easy, things are going to be hard, and to be able to like be comfortable with that, like that's all just unbelievably valuable, I think. So anyway, carry on.
Well, and the other like bigger thing that I would say here, sorry to interrupt you, Brian, but just this thought to say is like also finishing. Because there would be kids that would start and they would, in their point of view, not be successful, and they wouldn't want to finish the season. And I would have one-on-one conversations with the kid on the bench. Why do you want to quit? Why not finish? I would have the same conversations with parents. And I think, there are reasons occasionally that should happen. But for the most part, learning that I'm not having fun, it's like work. But you know what? That's life, And so that moment of like finishing a 6-week season in the spring that's a big deal as well. And the self-image part of it, I really, really saw some kids thrive. Sorry, it's a little emotional actually. Just kids that had no self-image or poor self-image, and they really came out of it just really thriving. And that is, to me, that is really the pie in the sky, the thing that these bigger things that are, who cares about your batting average or all of those things that we're losing so much of that in life, and those opportunities now are being taken away from us. And I feel like this is that $250 that you're paying for 6 weeks is like, it is priceless in many ways.
It's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it. I know with my children that for me, I found it invaluable to have those experiences of learning how to win, how to lose, how to be on a team, how to perform as part of a team. It's not just you, it's everybody involved. But I will say that the coach has everything to do with their development, and the other parents also, the pressure that is put on these kids from the parents. And I'm sure it's the same in the dance community. You hear about dance moms and dance dads and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's big time that way in Little League. And I was on both sides of it because my youngest son has amazing athletic ability. However, he doesn't have a killer instinct. He doesn't care if he strikes out. He'll go up there, and to him, it's just about having fun. And he'd be teased relentlessly by all the other kids on his team and the coaches and the other parents. And for him, it was about being part of the team as a social aspect. It was having fun. He was enjoying himself. He was doing well enough, but he was also on the number one team. So he was, average on the number one team, and they expected more. And it was really a challenge as a parent to sort of see the pressure put on these kids at such a young age. Because we're talking about Little League. We're not talking about high school. There's no scouts in the stands, looking at these kids. These are just kids having fun. And the parents and coaches, I think, sometimes take the fun out of it. And I think when working with the youth, we need to make sure that the fun is put back in.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. I think it's a really valid point. And it's interesting, the parental involvement. And look, everybody has their own unique experience as a family. So I'm not criticizing, I'm just merely stating all the things that are out there. And it's interesting, you have the higher pressure situation in parents, and then you have the complete opposite. That this is more of just like organized babysitting that I'm paying for. I could care less about it. And so that also creates an interesting dynamic as well. And the complexity of like, the term coach it's so generic. And I think, but it has such a connotation once you start doing it, because it is a relatively complicated role that you're dealing with, especially with kids. And what's interesting is, so the industry itself, So next year, youth sports will profit $40 billion.
Wow.
$40
Oof.
billion. And I
That creates some incentive.
No kidding.
100%. And, you know, listen, for those that have kids out there, we all, for the most part, want the best for our kids. We want to set our kids up for success, you know? And what does that look like? And so, you know, in just talking about like the business side of it, and I am guilty. And I know, you know, it's easy to get wrapped up in this, especially if your child starts to have some success. Will they be a Major League Baseball player? The likelihood is so minimal. But if your kid is having success and they are enjoying it, then that is, you know, it's easy to get wrapped up in it with the lessons and the teams. And I would say, you know, any advice that I have to give related to that is, let's go back to what the kid needs. Let's go back to their physical needs and what they need. Before you get them into a hitting coach and a pitching coach and a club team, take them to someone that really understands movement.
Yes.
Because, you know, with our teams, and it was like being in a lab. I could really try a lot of different movement things. And you have these kids that can, and I'm talking a little bit older, so we're talking about more like 9 or 10, in terms of programming to them, very similar to what's happening with adults. They need simple movement and straight movement forward first before we get to the more complicated footwork of a soccer ball. If a 9 or 10-year-old cannot hold a single leg balance, if they can't hardly do a squat, if they can't go from standing down to the ground and get back up in an organized fashion, how do you think they are going to be able to achieve these specialized skills? And the interesting thing about this, so I sat on a panel, and it was specifically on youth sports. This was probably like 10 years ago. So Chris Ahmad was on there. He's the team doctor of the New York Yankees, a leading PT that worked specifically with youth athletes, and then one of these big like national club team baseball guys, and then you have the Pilates instructor on the end, whatever he does. So I'll never forget this stat. So it was the same year CC Sabathia won the Cy Young Award for the New York Yankees, and Josh Beckett was pitching for the Red Sox. They compared their innings to the average 16-year-old pitcher. Who do you think was throwing more?
Oh, the 16-year-old.
About 35% more.
Yeah.
And then the other piece of this that really blew me away, and you know these sort of extreme situations are out there. So first of all, the percentages, and I'm just going to use baseball in a silo here for a moment. The percentages of UCL tears are off the charts. Off the charts. I've been told by multiple orthopedic surgeons that perform Tommy John that they have had a parent bring a healthy kid to them and say they have heard that Tommy John will increase their velocity. Now, that doesn't happen frequently, but that mindset is out there.
Yep.
And the interesting thing again, and this kind of goes back to the developmental piece, if their core and their ability to organize has not been properly developed, and then they are basically playing the same sport for a year. So that's the thing that's changed. So back in the day, back in like the 1800s when I played sports, you had what's called seasons. So you play baseball.
Back in the day. Yeah.
Right? Then you would play basketball. Then you would play another sport. And that sport that you were previously playing would be dormant. At that point, you are developing an extremely well-rounded, active person because they have specific skill sets that they're being asked to do in a relative, digestible amount of time. Now what happens, and I'll use baseball, you have a spring season, 6 weeks. And this is mostly with 10-year-olds and up. Then you move into your summer season. Okay, baseball is a summer sport. They play for summer, then they get 2 weeks off in August, and then they're back up. They play fall ball until November, and then they go right into winter training. So they realistically are playing year round. Now, this also happens with soccer. You go from outdoor to indoor. It happens with lacrosse. You go from outdoor to indoor. Football, flag football. It happens everywhere. And if they're not participating in the sport, then they're training for it.
Right. Exactly.
And so, I mean, the shoulder can only take so many overthrows, So, and then that's where the money comes in. And, again, I think as a general rule, most parents, they are doing what they want to do to support their kids, right? And you find a kid that enjoys it, And my advice in terms of a parent in sports is if the kid doesn't ever want to be there, I think there's a point to have that conversation of maybe there's something else. Let's finish out the season, but don't force the kid to do it. And then the other thing is maybe you're just overwhelming them with activity. Maybe playing on 2 club teams of baseball and playing 2 club teams of soccer. I mean, the schedules I have seen, and again, I'm guilty. I fortunately, up until recently, coached my kids so I could navigate the schedule and kind of make it a little more digestible. But not everyone has that luxury. So my point is, like with any activity, at what point is it counterproductive because the level of intensity and participation is way too high? The other part of the youth athlete in terms of like the sports part of it is it's expensive. It is really expensive. Travel teams, they hit 12 years old, and some of them are traveling to multiple different states. They're flying to different tournaments. Now, I'm not criticizing that, but my comment is not everyone has financial access and has the means to do that.
Absolutely.
And it's another level of stress that is added to parenting that really, is challenging. Now, can we talk about Pilates a little bit and kids?
Sure.
Absolutely.
So, so my Instagram is Matt Kinected, and then we also have our studio Instagram, which is Kinected.
And that'll all be in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So.
_ Kate School. So I post videos of me working with my boys, and it is challenging, to say the least, for various reasons. First of all, the younger they are, the less they can process, nervous system wise and physically. So the value of the isometric contraction that we find in adults is just as important in kids, because it allows that neurological loop to connect. And because of the laxity in the body, it's more conservative, and so there's less of a chance of injury. And what I saw is like, not egregious injuries, right? You're not talking about ACL tears. That does happen, but very rarely in the older kids. But I'm talking about the younger kids, but they're getting things like lateral epicondylitis, medial epicondylitis, tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. They're getting severs in their foot and ankle, plantar fasciitis, a lot of the itises. And a lot of that is because it's coinciding with a growth spurt. And so you have this stress on the growth plate. So in terms of training the youth athlete, that's where the highest risk is where the growth plate is. There's a certain amount of stress that needs to be there. It needs to be stressed because that growth plate needs to solidify. And we all know Wolff's Law and the bone remodeling process is a cycle. Well, this is part of that in loading. But repeated stress over and over and over again can cause these itises develop, and also a fracture. So what I have seen last year, I saw probably during the spring summer season 10 players that had to be completely shut down due to a potential fracture in their growth plate in their knee and or in their elbow.
Wow.
That is one of to manage that emotionally is very difficult, because the kid wants to play, and then you're dealing with a kid that gets a little depressed. And it's mostly because they're just overdoing it and they're not supporting it with some sort of cross training. Now they can do Pilates, for them at that age, before they hit puberty, less mobility, more stability is what you're going to be really factoring in.
100%.
I use the equipment, certainly it can be a little bit of a conundrum because of their size and depending how large how tall they are. But most kids, like on a practical level, like side splits is an incredible exercise for them. It moves through a different plane that they don't move through a lot. That side to side motion, shifting their weight, and you can do a lot of that. Incorporating balance into their training is a huge part of it, because they're not getting it in these sports. An isolation, like have them just do a single leg balance and throw a ball back and forth. Have your team pair up and do it. Let them do that. It's pretty easy to sneak these things into a warm up for a team. Go small, think like 10, 15 minutes. And that's initially what you're looking at with a youth athlete. So the program that I have it's usually 5 sessions. And the timing works like this. There's an hour eval where I do a lot of different movement things, look at their coordination, look at their balance, look at their overall strength and flexibility. And then the sessions after that, depending on the kid, are either 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And they're no longer than that. I mean, as adults, we're pushing it now with attention in an hour. So, with a kid of that age, and making it sort of fun, but still focused at the same time. I would say the thing on a practical level that can make it challenging is the spring tension. So really being mindful. More proximal joint, make sure it's stable. and more distal joint can be a little more mobile, you know, but really focusing on the hip and the shoulder and the trunk, it's not completely different from what we do with adults. It's just really kind of reining it in a little bit more. So, you know, those are the things that in terms of like programming that I do. And it's interesting. You do have those youth athletes. They're extraordinary in their focus at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are those kids, and you can give them homework. Integrate the thing that really drives me nuts is like the no warm up at all before a game. And I hate to point the finger at the coach because sometimes the coaches just don't know, or they're a volunteer. And you cannot fault a volunteer because they're giving that time. And so my advice is find someone that works with cross training with kids that can assemble some sort of workout that is tailored to them. And they can incorporate that in before a game or before a practice.
Nice.
So
Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting that the entire cross training thing is I'm huge on, and have been for my whole adult life. I find that kids become very specialized, and I see it. And I see because I've trained a lot of kids. I've trained a lot of their parents because that's usually how they end up with me, right? You train the parent first, and then the kid's like, oh, my son, he's a lacrosse player. He's this player. He's that player. And the kids often aren't as dedicated as the parents are, you know, and they're only doing that one sport. With my kids, when we were young, I always wanted to make sure that I trained them in a way that was going to do things besides just their sport. And I didn't want to necessarily take them to the gym yet because, hey, there's time for that.
Yeah.
So I would bring all of our toys out, what we call toys, you know, sand bells and, you know, balls and all sorts of things, and take it to the park and give them drills that they didn't even know they were doing and pit them against each other. I've got a 18-year-old and a 15-year-old, but sort of pit them against each other and play. And here, flip this, here, grab that, twist this, throw that as far as you can. Can you throw it farther? I think I can throw it farther. And have them use their whole body in space, because as they're using their body, it's only going to benefit them for their whatever sport they decide to do and for life in general. Yeah. But it's about getting them stronger at a level that isn't as specified. I learned this a long time ago. You probably have learned this as well, is that you take kids, and football players are notorious for this, same with hockey players. You take kids that have grown up in the gym and playing the sport, and that's all they do, versus a kid who was a farm kid who worked out in the fields, who became farm strong, who's not as defined and their body doesn't look as ripped and as cut because they didn't spend time in the gym. But you put them in an athletic activity and they can run rings around someone who did all that gym time because they have the rest of their body is so strong at doing all the other stuff that they can integrate all of that movement and those movement patterns into the sport. And I find that they become stronger, faster, better, so much easier than the kid who did spend nothing but time in the gym or in the sport.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, I mean, manual labor is going away quickly, right?
Yep.
The other thing I would just say, you know, in terms of any parents that are out there is encouraging playing another sport. Like try to play several sports up until, you know, when they start to get 13 or 14 and they're really, they're going through puberty. They're starting to just probably develop a passion for another sport. I remember Jules, and a lot of it had to do because he had success in a very small town in baseball. And I said, you got to play another sport. And this is when he was still dancing, but he was only getting that once a week. And he was like, I said, play basketball. Basketball is amazing. You have to work. You can play basketball anywhere. You can play by yourself. You can you can't play. You can only hit off a tee or throw a ball by yourself for so long until you go crazy. So he held off, and then he finally did it, and he has really, I think, his baseball has benefited physically for it because he's an infielder. But I think also when they're playing only one sport, there is a degree of pressure for success that they really start to internalize. And when if they have another sport, it just dissipates that. And it dissipates it for everyone in the room, the parents, the kid. And so it's a positive, healthy, emotional environment for it. I want to just hop back one practical recommendation. And it is interesting how similar it is between adults and youth. You just have different parameters with the youth. The lack of back extension and strength in this generation period is really significant. I cannot tell you the amount of my players that have complained about back pain, and I see them because we're in such a small town walking to school with a backpack that probably weighs like 25 or 30 pounds. And so just the practicality of back extension, and you know, most kids have a phone now, so they're getting into that increased kyphosis and then the forward head, and then you got, you know, a future, unfortunately, disc herniation or at least back tension and cervical pain. So that also is something that is really important in terms of making them a well-rounded person and athlete and healthy. You know, I will say that like sports are not for everyone, but it's worth trying with the kid because of all these other benefits that they help them as adults. I have had many trying moments. My memoirs are going to be titled "My Days at First Base as a First Base Coach," because my conversations with kids starting at the age of 5 going up to like 13 are priceless. And then there are moments of a kid pitching in a game that's falling apart, and you just know if they get through this, there's gonna be a breakthrough. And who cares if it's performance or it's as an adult? And there's been many times with me where I'm holding a parent back and I'm like, nope, let's let them get through this.
Yeah.
I know they can do it, and they do, you know? So there's, you know, I hope, you know, whatever people take from this, you know, there's the practical side of being an instructor. Like, keep it simple, keep it straightforward. The Pilates principles all still apply, but a lot of repetitive flexion and articulation of the spine is probably less of what they need and more of the stability route. They do like being on the equipment, but you can look on my Instagram, like, make it fun. I do simple things like side splits are great. Like, you can throw a ball back and forth to them. You can have them do functional things with the chair and a ball and simulate the sport, right? That we have so much, we have a huge amount of an opportunity to really simulate the biomechanics. And, you know, they're going to be a short-term client. And there's something to be said about that relationship, you know? And every instructor that is watching this knows what I mean. There are ebbs and flows there, but this is going to be, you know, one opportunity there. So try and encourage multi-sport and well-roundedness is what I would say when you're working with youth athletes.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you focused also on getting back extension, because that is something that I've worked on with my kids for the longest time, because that is what I call it the anti-bad posture exercise because they're doing bad posture all day long. And my kids have great posture. I got to pat them on the back. They're focused on it, even without me. But teaching them at a younger age, that's part of your core work. That's what you're doing at the beginning of your workout. Work on that.
Yeah.
And it's really ingrained it in them so that they're like, oh, I have to do it, which is great.
I think there should be a support group of kids of Pilates instructors or movement people.
I agree.
Because first of all, I'll never forget, Jules started correcting his teammates. I was like, we can't do that. But now they're like, they'll see bad posture and I'll get this look from them, But I mean, back is really, it seems so obvious, but it is going to be literally a lifesaver for people to where we're trending, which is a whole nother podcast for you to do. But anyway, I will just say that like Pilates can live in the cross training world.
Absolutely.
And it is very rewarding. And for those instructors that have wondered how receptive it can be, it really can be quite receptive, especially with these athletes as in the older ages, but can be with the younger as well.
Awesome. A lot to digest here, a whole lot to digest.
Yeah.
But I love the thoughts of really enforcing and reinforcing cross training and really reinforcing doing something different and also stepping out of that comfort zone. They're so good at one sport. Sometimes it's scary to go into something that they're not good at or they're going to feel awkward at. So challenging them that way, I think is great. And it's a great life experience as well. So I love the practicality of what we talked about today. It's awesome.
There was one other thing that I want to just say quickly, and it's more of a commentary on our society and youth athletes. And as my older son, who's now playing, he's playing on the JV teams. There's a lot of information on YouTube. There's highlights there. We all put stuff on there, but the body image part of this is really important. And because a lot of these youth athletes have access to these workouts and potentially really overtrained individuals, just stressing is, and look, I have seen kids as they become stronger, they have more defined muscles. There is a level of confidence there that is valid. However, what is more important is how you feel. And, particularly kids going through puberty, they get on YouTube and they're seeing all these extremes. And I think as movement professionals, to a certain degree, it's our job to police that and really educate them on there's a wide variety of bodies out there. And they are acceptable. And also it's about internally how you feel physically is more important than how you look. And by the way, people develop very at different times, and one may be shorter here than, how many times have we heard these pro athletes that are like, I was the worst player when I played in junior high school, the shortest, I was the slowest. And that is the other piece of this, is just the physicality, and feeling better is something that is important to really stress with the athlete, because they can get so caught up in performance.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. Our hour is already sort of flown by. I can't believe it.
I didn't get the finger too much, so I hope I didn't over talk.
Matt,
and those watching, it's not the finger that you're thinking about.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, now, wait a minute.
And honestly, you had so much to say, and there was so many different parts of it. Like I felt like this was scratching the surface.
Yeah.
No, like here's a little bite, here's a little bite, here's a little bite. And so, for me listening, I was just like, I was absorbing, and sometimes they're not, sometimes there's more back and forth, but I was just absorbed. There's just a lot of information there that was like, okay, just taking it in. So, thank you for that. I feel like I learned a lot. I hope you guys out there in the audience did as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. And I'd love to invite you to come back on another podcast where we can sort of dive into the specifics of maybe take a look at different sports and coming up with short sort of programming ideas, not necessarily do this exercise, but we want to do lateral flexion here. We want to focus on extension here, so that the average instructor who only has 2 or 3 athletes coming to them at most would be like, oh, I now know what I can do. So I think that breaking down the practicality from concept to really specifics, I think would be fun.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be great.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
And then we'll start our support group for our kids.
Exactly.
Movement instructors. Well, thank you for your time and my time, being able to spend this time with you. I really appreciate it. Again, a lot of respect for this platform and getting this information out there. So from the movement community, I'm just expressing gratefulness that you've put this together.
Well, we really appreciate it. Do me a favor, tell us it's going to be in the show notes, but tell us your socials again, so those who are listening know how to get in touch with you or can follow you and follow along.
Sure. So my personal is Matt Kinected, and that's KINECTED. And then the other one is Kinected_Cane School. And we post monthly exercises, but there's a fair amount of some of the youth athlete on there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys very much again for listening. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your time, Matt. I had a wonderful time with you in China. I thought it was fantastic getting to know you. It's always fun for instructors to sort of get together and see each other instead of just on stage as the teacher, to actually see and get to know you as a person. So I really appreciated that and loved what little time we did have together. I really enjoyed it. So
mutual. Thank you.
I appreciate it. So thank you guys for listening. As always, hit us up, like and subscribe, all of that. Email us at movingconvos@gmail.com. Also, you can check us out on our Instagram at Moving Convos. For Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.